What's interesting to me about what you're saying is that you're demonstrating that there's a particular worldview of racial strife permanence that emanates in this particularly post civil rights black scholarship that comes around in the 80s and 90s. I was in law school. I remember when critical race theory comes up, that at the time in which literally the black political class has more control over regional cities and black political life than any other time in American history, black people are being integrated more and more into participating in ruling class functionality more and more. Yet at the same time, theories develop, particularly out of intersectionality and critical race theory, that are saying that not only is racism permanent, nothing has changed. That's one of the tenets of Derrick Bell, is that there is nothing that changes. If they want to go, I don't know if they want to use 1619. There is nothing that is different from 1619 to
Don't forget to
literally
add, Pascal, don't forget to
21st.
add that as Black people are being integrated into the political machine, it's from a bipartisan perspective as well. It's not just strictly in the Democratic Party in this same time frame that you talk about, even a little bit before.
That's
So I
correct.
think that's very important to note as well. I'll shut up now.
And yet they posit that in the height of all that, that nothing has changed just because white people are still racist, basically.
Well, I think there's a couple of features to why they posit nothing has changed. So when they posit this, they're talking about the one mechanism that creates inequality that has the most meaning for them, which is discrimination, right? So if your primary lens of understanding inequality is that discrimination, that people who are, you might say, equally qualified for a particular position, and the one differentiating factor, especially in elite position, because we have to remember that critical race theory started in elite law schools.
Correct.
Right? And if indeed the thing that you are interested in interrogating is integration or success within the meritocracy, and you look at the fact that indeed race, in the words of Cornel West, still matters in terms of access, particularly access in certain elite spaces, right? And again, I go back to this notion of mechanism, because what I think that class analysis makes clear is a variety of different mechanisms that produce inequality. And chief among them being exploitation, which is one that things like critical race theory seem a little bit less interested in. But anyway, to circle sort of back to why they think nothing has changed. So if the primary mechanism for producing inequality that interests you and that you wish to trace over time, indeed, discrimination has existed over time, for over long duration, right? And continues to plague us. But if you go back to certain historical events, for example, and try to understand slavery as primarily a system about discrimination, it leaves you sorely lacking in understanding what brought forth that particular institution, what were the forces that undermined it, and the forces that undermined it, their vision of what the future should look like. In other words, their vision of equality, right? If you go back with slavery with only this lens of discrimination, yeah, there was discrimination there, but it wasn't the most important thing to understand.
Well, I want to kind of let's stay there for a second. And I remember having a conversation with Touré, and I can't even remember what the conversation started about, but he brought up the fact that one of the first things he has to teach his class, I think it's his freshman class, is about the idea of slavery being about labor and not about the evil of white men. And I think 1619 definitely posits that argument that, slavery only happened in 1619, and we're not even going to talk about enslaved natives. That was like 200 years before. So, and not discussing the labor relation. What do we miss when we leave that whole part out and we strictly make it a discussion about the evil of white people?
You miss a couple of things. one of the most important things you miss that a variety of Marxist scholars, probably my favorite among them being Barbara Fields, has pointed out is that the holding of people in bonded labor, right, actually predates the emergence of a full-blown racial ideology by almost a century, right? So, or even Eric Williams, in his famous thesis that we often think that racism gave rise to slavery, or people were enslaved, quote unquote, on account of their race. And what the point that he makes in Capitalism and Slavery is that we've got the causality reversed, that actually racism arises as a result of slavery. And it is because of basically race is a technology of social control that developed, in order to do a variety of things. Chief among them be secure people's property rights and people, figure out how to make slavery heritable. I mean, there's a variety of things about the labor relation, right? The sort of political the terrain that they're negotiating that leads to the rise in the idea of race. But again, it actually comes after the labor relation, not before. And so I think when you again have that sort of view of history, it's a strange one because it's like it's both right and wrong. It doesn't completely misinterpret history. However, it removes so many things from history that would help us to understand our present predicament and also to strategize about what a better future would look like. That blinkered view actually takes off the table a more comprehensive understanding of how inequality is produced and reproduced over historical time.
Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out. You can catch the live stream of This is Revolution every Tuesday through Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time and Saturday, 9 a.m. Pacific Time. This is Revolution.